Hey guys, welcome to a list of 10 of my favorite books from the last year. Honestly, I couldn't make it a list of like top 10 completely because I read so many good books. I already decided to limit myself to 10 books and there was too many to choose from. So I decided to go with 10 books that I own physically, and that helped narrow things down a bit. But just know that there was a lot more really good books that I read in 2022. And these span a number of different genres because I enjoy a number of different genres. Although lately, science fiction and historical fiction and mystery suspense have been my favorites. And I feel like that's mostly reflected in here. And if you want more of those recommendations, I did create a videos like on each of those genres back in December, so you can find those in my channel. I'll try to remember to leave them linked below as well. All that to say, I like a lot of books. Here are 10 really good ones that I hope you read. And we're not really going to go in any particular order because there's so many different genres. I didn't feel like I could go, from least favorite to favorite. If it was all the same genre, I feel like that would be easier because you can compare them. The first one I did kind of on its own because this one is the only non-fiction that made the list for the year. This one is going to come as no surprise if you've been here at all in the last while. This is Adorning the Dark. I read this back in, I think, September and loved it so very much. I don't really know how to describe this book. It's like part memoir, part Christian living, kind of, but not really, and like 20 parts inspiration. The subtitle is Thoughts on Community, Calling, and the Mystery of Making. And if you enjoy being creative in any format, I highly recommend this book. The author here, Andrew Peterson, is a singer, songwriter, poet, author, and publisher, and he is many things. So he talks kind of like along those veins a lot. But even if you're not interested in those specific things, I think you could benefit from this book if you enjoy creating. When you're like on the preface and you tab something as something you love, it's going to be a good book. And I feel like this sums up the book. He was talking about how he found out what kind of like his calling in life is, and really everyone's calling. That calling, as I understand it, is to use whatever gifts I've been given to tell the truth as beautifully as I can. And I feel like I have taken that on as my phrase, my calling. It's always something that when I read that I was like, oh yeah, for sure, that makes sense. That's what I've been thinking about, but not in such specific words. Yes, I have sung this book's praises so much, so very much. I feel like everyone that's creative or a Christian or honestly, I just want everyone to read it. Anyone, everyone. Please read it. Okay, now we'll go on to the other 9, which are all non-fiction in no particular order because I just didn't care to put them in order. The first one is only middle grade that made the list. There was other middle grade I enjoyed, but this is the one that made the list. A Place to Hang the Moon. So this is historical fiction set during World War II. We follow 3 siblings who have to go live in the country during World War II, and the beginning of the book gives you Narnia vibes of the siblings going out to the country to live with someone, except these 3 had previously been living with their grandma, and she dies right before the book happens. We open up at her funeral, and we really get to know the characters' personalities by how they act at the funeral, as well as their relationship with their grandmother, which was not great. And the lawyer tells them they actually came into quite a bit of money when their grandma died, but they have no one to look after them. So he says, why don't you go to the countryside and, you bill it with people and see if there's a family that will adopt you, but don't tell them, but just, check the family out. And so they go and, they have some unfortunate things happen, and not everyone is a good fit, but I love this book. There's so many things in here, like gold nuggets for readers and bookish people. The children all enjoy reading, and they're reading classics, and they spend a lot of time at a library with a fireplace, and I would recommend reading this in the winter, especially around Christmas. It has those Christmas vibes, but even in the cold depths of January winter, this would be a really good read. Okay, and of course, a Jamie Jo Wright has to come on this list. She released 2 this last year, and so I had to pick between the 2, which isn't fair, because I also tried not to have any duplicate authors, because I could have had duplicate authors on this list, but I, you know, had to limit myself. So I went with The Souls of Lost Lake. I feel like this is the most controversial of her books because it's definitely the darkest of her books. So she writes dual timeline, like early 1900s and then modern day. And in this one, we follow a girl named Ava Coons, who at the beginning of like the 1900s or so, 19 something, she comes out of the woods with a huge axe, and her family has been all been murdered, and of course the town thinks that she's done it. And then we actually follow her, I think she was about 13 or so when that happened, and then we follow her like as a 19-year-old as she's dealing with all this prejudice from the town and trying to figure out who actually killed her family, because she's totally blacked out, or her memory has suppressed that event. So she's not even entirely sure if she killed them or not. She doesn't think she did, but she doesn't know. And then modern day, we are following a woman named Wren who is living at a camp. Her dad is like the camp director, and this is in the same woods where Ava was. And so the Coons cottage is there, and there is a missing child that went missing in these woods in the modern day timeline. And I always love how Jamie Jo Wright weaves the stories together, hits on difficult topics. Like her books need, like, they do come with a lot of trigger warnings because they do deal with heavy topics, but I'm so glad she doesn't shy away from them because I feel like she addresses them so well. And our character's faith, I feel like, is always either super strong or they're developing it as they go, and I always admire the characters. So I loved this one. Then a new to me author, I think I read 3 of her books this year, still have a few more to go, and I debated on which one to include here as well, but I'm gonna go with The Lost Melody. This is by Joanna Davidson Politano. So her books are set in Victorian England, which her first book that I read this year was Lady Jane Disappears, and that is a book that got me hooked on historical fiction. Prior to that, I never really read much historical fiction, didn't think I really enjoyed it, and her books have proven it wrong, and it is now one of my favorite genres. So in this one, it like makes me anxious just thinking about it, because I felt so much claustrophobia while I was reading this book. And as much as maybe that sounds like a negative thing, when reading a book can make you feel such emotions, like that is a 5-star book in my mind. So in this one we follow a concert pianist. Her name is Vivienne. Her father dies at the beginning of the book. She's not really too sad about it because he wasn't the nicest guy, but her manager wants her to take a break for a mourning period because it wouldn't look good if she was, you know, performing concerts right after her father died. But for some reason she decides to go, she wants to still work, and she goes to work at this asylum, Hurstwell Asylum. And there's suspicious things going on, and I don't know, I feel like this is one of those books I don't like to say a whole lot about, but she wrote the atmosphere of this asylum so very well. I read a couple, I think 2 asylum books this year, and they were both good, but this one was the best for sure. And yeah, it was interesting to see the reasons that people were put into asylums back in the day, like super minor ones. Many people in there because people just wanted them out of the way, not really because there was really anything wrong with them. Yes, loved this book. I'm gonna say that with each one. Okay, so I went to my library book club last week, and we did, for the wrap up of the year, we did our favorite books. We just all came and talked about our favorite books. And so I have a struggle with knowing which are my favorite books, and it depends on who I'm talking to, because depending what people like, I want to recommend favorite books of mine that people might like, and this is one of the ones I started the night off talking about. It is The Nature of Small Birds by Susie Finkbeiner. Once again, I had troubles picking which one of her books was going to make this list, but this one has adoption themes which are close to my heart, so this one won out. So this one I find so hard to explain because our main character is not actually someone that we follow in this book. We follow her 3 family members through 3 different time periods. So we follow her mom, Linda, in 1975 as they actually adopt the main character. Her name is Mindy. She has come over from Vietnam and is a Vietnam orphan. So we follow her in 1975. We follow Sunny, who is Mindy's adoptive sister, in 1988. So we get to see Mindy as she's a teenager. And then we follow Bruce, who is the dad. We follow him in 2013. And in that time frame, Mindy is looking into her birth family, seeing if she can find any information on them. And this book, oh man, when they got the adoption call, first of all, like tears streaming down my face, because that brings back so many memories. The story is very different from our adoption, but it still triggered some really emotional times in my life, like good emotions. And then as Mindy is like trying to find her birth family, I loved it all. Yeah, highly recommend this book. And her other one that I read so far is All Manner of Things. Recommend that one as well. Sneak in some extra recommendations here. Okay, well, the next 2 here that I have are science fiction, so it's almost like I've done this in order. Project Hail Mary. This is one of those books that is actually quite popular and I enjoy. I feel like that doesn't overlap very often. And it is another one of those books where I don't feel like you can say very much about. We start the book with a character who is on a spaceship and he doesn't remember his name. He doesn't remember why he's there. And therefore, we learn a lot about what's going on as he regains some memories. He is in this room where there's like a computer that tests him, and like the more knowledge the more right answers he gives, the more access he gets to the spaceship, which is really neat. Yeah, so I don't want to say much. I was spoiled for like the main big thing that happens. I knew it already, but I still really enjoyed it. And then I loved seeing how it played out. And then I was so curious as to how he was going to end this, because I felt like he had written himself into a bit of a bind, but the ending was unexpected and I think I like it. It's one of those endings where it's like, well, it could have been cool this way or this way, but he took it a different way and I think I like how he ended it. Yeah. So, oh, and then I have read The Martian by Andy Weir. What I really appreciated about this book above The Martian is The Martian has a lot of swearing. It's still a really good book, but there's a lot of swearing. And in this one, our main character, for reasons he remembers as he goes, he doesn't swear very much, at least. And so I appreciated that. So I can skim over swearing in reading, like in text. I wouldn't want to listen to an audiobook with a lot of swearing because I feel like that gets in more, but I don't generally have problems with it in text. I prefer it not to be in there, but something like The Martian where you're trapped on a planet by yourself and you're trying to survive, I feel like, you know, I can understand the swearing a little bit more, but I appreciated that there wasn't really any in here. And then Recorder. This is another one I've been raving about since I read it, I think in November. This one is, we're in space, I think like in the future, but there's not really a time given, but our main character is what is called a recorder. Recorders live in this building called the Consortium, and they are raised to be recorders. They are supposed to be unbiased people who record events. Now, in order to raise these, what start out as babies and children, as unbiased people, they're not given names. Everyone is just called recorder. Their heads are shaved, or actually, I think all their hair is shaved. So they try not to have like any distinguishing features. And they're not allowed to show emotion because that would indicate bias. And then at a certain age, they're hooked up to a drone that if they do show emotion, they get, I think it's an electrical shock, some kind of punishment for showing emotion. And in the book, our main character, Recorder, she gets sent out on this mission. These humans are going out on some kind of mission to check out this other like space station kind of thing. And she's supposed to go along as the recorder, but something happens and her drone gets damaged, and she is, for the first time in many years, in this place where, well, really for the first time in her life, where she's actually able to show emotion and not be punished for it. And so it's so interesting to see her inner struggle with, well, here's the emotions I'm feeling, but I'm not supposed to be feeling emotions, and then trying to figure out like who she is and what she should be doing. It was very fascinating, and I'm so excited to read book 2 as soon as I can get my hands on it, which, spoiler, I think is coming soon, thanks to someone who is very amazing. Okay, well, this wasn't really intentional, but I guess my books are kind of arranged by genre on my shelves, so as I pulled them off, it was kind of in order. So the next 3 are mystery, but kind of like historical mysteries. So Agatha Christie technically wasn't a historical mystery when it was written, but it is now. I had to pick one of her books to be on this list. I had a number of favorites. I do have a favorites video with like my best Agatha Christie and my worst based on my star ratings, but I kind of disagree with some of them. But 450 from Paddington was definitely one of my favorites from the year. So in this one, well, okay, it's a Miss Marple, and Miss Marple is in the book from like almost the very beginning, so that's nice. Miss Marple is such a fun character. Like, she's very much behind the scenes. We don't follow her like we follow Poirot, but I love how unassuming she is, and not nearly, she's not at all conceited, unlike Poirot. I love her as a character and an old lady, and I just have an old lady heart, so Miss Marple and I have a connection. But 450 from Paddington, this lady who actually happens to be Miss Marple's friend, she's on a train, and as she's riding the train, I think to Miss Marple's house, another train like comes up beside them for a brief, beside her for a brief second, and then like pulls ahead. But for that brief second that they're right beside each other, she witnesses a murder, but there's no body. No one like said that there was anything happen, so she's telling this to Miss Marple, but she doesn't know, like, but there's no evidence. So Miss Marple starts to investigate, and I just had a lot of fun with this one. Yeah, I think I have a whole video trying to solve this one as well, which I can leave linked below. Miss Marple's just the best. I wish she would have had more Miss Marple stories, and I wish people would stop trying to like rewrite Agatha Christie's books more on the Poirot side. Like, I want, give me more Miss Marple. Okay, and then these other 2 are like newer books that are mysteries set in the past. So Maisie Dobbs. Maybe this was my intro into historical fiction this year, because this one is so very unique. So it is a mystery, it's a historical mystery, but it's set up in such a different way. So I think I actually talked about this one in my library book club as well, but I think I explained it wrong. So in the beginning, we start out in spring 1929. So we're following this woman named Maisie Dobbs, she was a nurse in World War I, and she's kind of starting up like a detective agency. So the first quarter of the book is mystery. And then we flash back to, I think, like something when she was younger, like when she was 13 or 14. And so then the next half of the book is like historical fiction. We follow her as she gets a job as a maid at this place, but the people soon realize that she's very smart. She's waking up early and staying up late and like using their library to read books on all sorts of different topics. So they decide to like send her to school, and we get like this whole background of what happened to her kind of in the past. And then the last quarter of the book, we go back to the mystery, and I feel like that was such a good introduction to historical fiction for me. It was like a little bit of historical fiction, but like also mystery. And this series has a number of books. I think it's getting close to about 20 books out now, and I've only read the first 2, but thoroughly enjoyed it. I read this entire book in one day. I was sick one day, pretty much laid in bed and read this book, and it was, despite being sick, it was an amazing day. Okay, and then the last one, which I said is also historical mystery, is a I can't say the word again. A peculiar combination. Thanks to this book, I'm getting better at saying that word. So in this one, we are set during World War II. Our main character, her name is Ellie, and her uncle are locksmiths / safe breaker introers. Probably not actually a word. They're locksmiths, but they also break into people's safes. And right at the first chapter of the book, they're, doing a break-in, and the police catch them, and they're given the option. You can like help with the war effort, use your talents to help with the war effort, or you can go to jail. And this would be kind of like a very different book if they decided to go to jail. So obviously they decide to help with the war effort. And it's interesting to see how she uses the knowledge that she has from being a thief to like helping things out. I have now read, I think, the third book in the series, and third? I don't even remember now. I feel like it's not going to be a series that I'm going to be loving for a super long time, but I am enjoying it so far. Okay, so there are 10 books plus a few like bonus recommendations snuck in there that I loved this last year. Tell me in the comments like a favorite book or 2 or 10 from the year. Try to limit yourself a little bit, but it's okay if you can't. I can completely understand. Thank you so much to all of you who have been giving me recommendations for the last year. Lots of these books are because of you guys, and I appreciate that so much. I'll see you guys again soon.